Hello and welcome back for another historic video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this Goblin Charbelcher Oops All Spells deck. The deck is looking to play out Goblin Charbelcher and then activate it and deal lethal damage to your opponent. The rest of the deck is pretty much all mana. Usually on turn 1 we'll play out one of our MDFC lands tapped, and then on turn 2 we're looking to follow up with either a Gold Hound, which can be sacrificed for your mana, or Strike It Rich, creating a treasure token. At 2 mana, some of our ramp cards are Charming Scoundrel, creating a treasure, Reckless Barbarian, which can be sacrificed to add 2 red, and Magma Opus, which can be cycled to create a treasure token. One of the interactions we look for in this deck is having the Barbarian and Opus. That way, if our opponent tries to answer the Barbarian, we can use the 2 floating mana to cycle in response and still ramp. At 4 mana, we have the Irencrag Feat. This sorcery adds 7 red mana, but only allows us to cast a single spell afterwards, which would be the Goblin Charbelcher itself, and the remaining 3 mana can be used to activate it in the same turn, which is an ideal scenario for us. Then the only non-mana / ramp card in the deck is Pact of Negation, which is a 0-cost instant that we can use to counter target spell. This can be used as protection on the Charbelcher to counter an opposing player's counter spell, or it can be used after the Charbelcher is in play to counter a removal spell, or just as a tempo play to stop our opponent from putting lethal on the board via a haste creature or burn spell. When it comes to the MDFCs, occasionally we might use Spakefield Hazard as a removal spell for a 1 toughness creature, and Valakut Awakening occasionally could be used to cycle through our hand if our Charbelcher is answered or discarded to try and find another one. But outside of that, I don't really foresee us casting any of the others on their front side. Historically, this deck typically presents a pretty quick win, either on turn 3 or 4, and is pretty difficult to interact with since many decks in the format don't play good artifact interaction. One thing to note though, we don't have a ton of selection of our own, so usually we'll be mulliganing pretty aggressively to find the Goblin Charbelcher, which, since our deck is all mana, is usually not a big deal, especially if we go quite low, since it's very likely that all of our top decks are mana. Occasionally on a deep mulligan, you will run into an instance where you draw a couple of your spells before you get a land, and that could slow us down, but usually that's not the case. Before we jump into the gameplay, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe the video. It really helps the channel. And without further ado, let's jump into the games. This hand doesn't have Charbelcher. I'll mulligan. This is better. We'll keep this, and then we'll put the Gold Hound back. It is the most vulnerable as a creature card. Start on the cliffs. Then here we can play Strike It Rich. Play out a tap land, pass the turn. Light pause means that we're going to want to combo off all in the same turn here, because it can always just tutor up Sheltered by Ghosts. So it's going to be a race to see if we can get up to 7 mana before our opponent can kill us. We do have 7 if our opponent doesn't use Sheltered by Ghosts on the Barbarian, but I find that highly unlikely. Well, they attack in without playing out any more R's. So here we'll just go for it. Play out the Charbelcher. Bolt in a land. Target our opponent. Think we got a bit lucky there, but we'll take the win. This hand looks good. We'll keep. Then here we'll start on a tapped land, pass the turn. Up against the red deck. We could play out the Reckless Barbarian here. Don't think we need to. Just play another tap land and pass. Izzet colors from our opponent. Looks like they're on the Wizards deck. And they're going to give their Symmetry Sage haste. We'll take 6. Could end up being a close one here. Play out another tap land, pass the turn. Would rather have the Irencrag in this situation as opposed to the Pact of Negation. Take 3 down to 11. Faithless Looting, not a card you normally see in the Wizards deck. So I really just don't want to see them drop another creature here. They discard a Swift Spear. And what do you know? We top deck the Irencrag. So we could either play out the Charbelcher and try and use Pact to counter something, or we can go for the win right here. And I think that's what we're going to do. Not able to count anything now, since this is our one spell following the Irencrag. But that's enough. Good game. No Charbelcher here, so we'll take a mulligan. Here we go. And then we'll put back the Goldhound. And probably the Charming Scoundrel. Looks like we're in a mirror match. Faithless Looting, so their deck is built a little bit differently than ours. Play out Strike It Rich. Seems like they might have a force here. Opponent shocks in. Brotherhood's End. We'll make blue mana. Confuse them a bit. Continue to hit our land drops. And since life total doesn't really matter here, we'll bolt it in here. They flashback looting from their graveyard. Opponent is either in the tank or they've disconnected. Looks like they're roping us because they're still holding full priority. So just being a poor sport. We'll bolt in. Actually, we don't even need to. We can just play it tapped. Then we'll play out the Charbelcher. Set it up, keep stop in case we need to use Pact of Negation. And that's the game. On to the next. Have to take a mulligan here. There's the Charbelcher. So we'll keep this and then put back one of the Goldhound. And probably the Barbarian as well here. Starting a tap land. Next turn we can play out the Goldhound next to another tap land. And then if it survives, we can try Charbelcher on 3. Another mirror match. So here we get to attempt a Charbelcher. Notably, we don't have any protection or acceleration here. But our opponent concedes, so it seems that they don't have it either. On to the next. We'll take a mulligan here. And there's the Charbelcher. We can keep this. And then It's between keeping 4 lands or 2 lands with the Barbarian. I think we actually will try a more aggressive hand this time. Can start on a tap land here and try and pick one that's a bit ambiguous. Opponent might not think we're on an Oops All Spells deck. Psychic Frog. And another Charbelcher. Not necessarily what we want. We'll bolt ourselves, play out the Barbarian, and then if this survives, we can try and play the Charbelcher next turn. Against the Mirror, don't have high hope though. They're likely to have a lot of removal spells. There is a Fatal Push. So we need to draw into another land now before we can play out a Charbelcher. I imagine this deck also has discard in it. They fetch right away. Not a good sign for us. And they get a swamp. So this will likely take our Pinnacle Monk if it's a Thoughtseize. It's a Unearth instead. That's actually pretty good for us. Means our lands no longer cause damage. Opponent preemptively indicated good game, so they may not know what kind of deck we're on. Down to 11. Opponent has 9 damage in play between their draw step if they discarded everything. We only have 1 protection spell here. Do they have a Spell Pierce or another Force? They do not. Consider. Don't expect this deck to have any artifact removal. They might have a bounce spell. They hit for 5. They have to bounce it now on their turn. But it looks like they didn't find it. So we got the victory. No Charbelcher. We'll take a mulligan. Here we go. And then here, I think we're going to put the Goldhound back. With the Opus and the Barbarian, if our opponent uses a removal spell on it, we can cycle the Opus in response and still go up mana. So here we will bolt ourselves and play out the Barbarian. No removal yet. Chain Lightning. And then before the mana burns off, we'll cycle. Bolt ourselves again. Play out the Charbelcher. Seems like our opponent might have a Force here to Spell Pierce. So now we're in a bit of trouble. We need to draw into another Charbelcher naturally, and we don't have much selection in our deck. We'll play out a tap land past the turn. Notably, if our opponent uses a Chain Lightning, we do have double red to take out the Arcanist. Manamorphose. Not typically in the Wizard's deck, but it does cycle nicely. Flame of Anor. If they're using that now, then they feel pretty confident that they're not going to need it for another Charbelcher. Might mean they already have one in hand. This is probably a mistake by our opponent. Yep, they choose not to use it. That's smart. We'll take our draw. And there's the Awakening. This can be played at instant speed. So I think that we're going to maybe play out the hazard tapped. We won't use it quite yet. We'll wait until we have a few more cards in hand that we can cycle through. Or if we start to come under pressure, which the show off will do. And then they have a pump spell for the Arcanist, so now it will be able to target a different spell from their graveyard. This might even be lethal already. Looks like it will be with the Wizard's Lightning. So they had the counter magic and were able to get the victory here. Three more to face, and this is more than enough for lethal. Good game. Don't have the Charbelcher here. This is better. And then we'll put back the Barbarian. Start on a tap land, pass the turn. White mana and a Sentinel. We don't mind that. We'll just play out the Gold Hound and could do a tap land here, could shock in. I think we'll keep the Spikefield Hazard. See what our opponent does next turn. It's likely an Aura's deck. There's the Sheltered by Ghosts. We'd like to see that on a Sentinel as opposed to on some of their more powerful creatures. So we can just play a tap land and pass. Second Sentinel. They'll get to draw a couple cards when we cast Charbelcher. Another armor here might be trouble. Opponent hits for 6. We'll cycle, that way we don't have to take any damage from the Charbelcher. And we'll make sure to put an upkeep stop in case we need the counter next turn. I believe our opponent should have enough to deal lethal here. It really depends on what they have in their hand. We have to counter anything that will give them lethal or remove the Charbelcher. This will take them up to 9 damage. Hushbringer we don't care about. And we'll try and kill our opponent here. Good game. This hand is good, we'll keep. Start on a tapped land. Looks like it could be Wizards again. And it is. We have a fairly fast hand with the Irencrag. However, all of our lands are tapped, so this will be a turn 4 play, which we may not survive through. And here we don't have any distractions, so it really comes down to whether our opponent can deal 16 damage or not. And it looks like they don't have it. So now it comes down to whether they have Force of Negation and a pitch card in hand. That resolved pretty quickly. And that should be lethal. Good game. Alright, so there you have the deck. And it put up another dominating performance today. Only losing to the Wizards deck, which had an abnormal card in it. Usually they don't play counter magic since it doesn't affect their prowess creatures on their turn. But alas, this one had a Spell Pierce, which was able to counter our Charbelcher And then the aggressive nature of the Wizards deck was able to finish us off before we were able to find another one. The Irencrag being able to speed up our Charbelcher win got us a couple victories, and outside of that, we were fast enough with our standard ramp cards to win most of the matchups. Didn't need to use the Pact of Negation against ours deck, but we had that available to us as well. This is definitely a viable deck for best of one to consistently combo your opponent out. And personally, I like the build strategy of this deck being all mana and less selection. Lets it be very consistent in the gameplay. If you haven't already guessed it from the record, this one gets 2 thumbs up from me, and I definitely recommend you give it a try. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.